Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film, Berberian Sound Studio. A British Foley artist or sound engineer named Gilderoy, played by Toby Jones, who has flown to Italy to work on a film called The Equestrian Vortex, which he believes to be a film about horses because it says equestrian. The film starts when he arrives at the studio and he finds out it's an Italian horror film, or a giallo. This film takes place during the 70s, and he's kind of horrified at first because he doesn't really know much about horror films. The director says this isn't a horror film, this is a Santini film. Hints at like a bit of Argento kind of Italian horror film that he's working on. Eerie, spooky, like psychological. I wouldn't say a thriller, it's just like it's a slow burn of a movie where Gilderoy, Toby Jones's character, is slowly getting into this world of both Italy, a language he doesn't understand, and a film world he doesn't understand. He's used to more working on horse documentaries and TV shows, I assume, and he's kind of being thrust into this world further and further as the film goes on. This is a horror film where it has the ambiance of a horror film. I haven't seen a horror film where ambiance is so important and it's used so well and effectively, and I don't think you'd have such a great film without it. I guess you could say most horror films are kind of like cheap beer. This is like a fine wine. It slowly like marinates in itself. You slowly see what's going on. It's a very slow movie, but it's very rewarding. Reminds me of Cronenberg and Lynch and 70s Polanski, like kind of The Apartment, but I never liked The Apartment, so maybe I mean Repulsion. It also kind of reminds me of Barton Fink. It's kind of a fish out of water story, but he's slowly kind of being drawn into this Italian film world, and it seems very creepy and scary, and I think mostly because you're seeing it through the eyes of someone who doesn't really understand this and doesn't know what he got into. This film feels like a dream, and not like, I know everyone says fever dream, and that's kind of the Terrence Malick style. I wouldn't say this is that kind of style. It feels like a dream that kind of evolves into a bad and even worse dream that it started out as. I like how spooky this film is, and it's spooky without even doing like a cheap scare. It's kind of spooky and mysterious. The film he's working on, you never really see. There's a lot you don't really know for a long time, and maybe we'll never figure out really. It's the kind of film you can't develop a lot of theories from and like really go over. And maybe this part means that, maybe this part means this, and I'm not really sure whether one person's right or one person's wrong. Toby Jones gives a really great performance as Gilderoy. He kind of reminds me a lot, and this film reminds me a lot of Blowout, the De Palma film, for obvious reasons because they're both about sound designers, with John Travolta in that film and Toby Jones in this film. The performances are very similar because it is someone kind of becoming unraveled as the film goes on. I wouldn't say necessarily this is a film about someone going insane. That's a little too on the nose. It's also very spooky in like that Cronenberg-y way and in that Lynch way that it feels like a nightmare, that life has lost meaning after a while, that everything's spooky and dark and brought down by it. The guy who directed this, Peter Strickland, who I've never seen his other film before. This was such a great film. He's certainly one of the smarter directors out there, and one of the few people who are making art films that are really like art film. This is like what I think of when I think of Lynch and Cronenberg and all these great finer directors, and I think Peter Strickland reflects one of those. It's a very smart movie, it's a very subtle movie, it's a very slow movie, so I don't think this film necessarily is for everyone, but if you are willing to get there, it's a very rewarding experience. It's a smart film, it's kind of intense, but it's also subtle, which is a weird combination, and it reminds me of that Polanski idea where someone's alone and you're not sure, are they going insane, are they not, am I misinterpreting this scene, is that me, is that the movie? It's a thoughtful film and it's an interesting film, and I really love Berberian Sound Studio, and I love this kind of a movie. The third act is definitely strange and weird and in a meta Cronenberg-y way. Analyzing it and interpreting it was so much fun. I'm going away thinking about what this film could be about and such, and I will tell you my theory behind it in the spoiler section, but for all of you who have not seen Berberian Sound Studio, this will be the end for you, I guess, or I hope, because I don't think you should ruin this movie for yourself. So this is going to be the spoiler section, so if you have seen Berberian Sound Studio, you can go on from this point, or if you're a total no fun jerk and you want to go on, that's, hey, you know, have a movie ruined for you for the sake of being a know-it-all. Anyway, so Berberian Sound Studio, at first I thought, oh well, he's clearly going insane, or is he? That's clearly like a very easy interpretation, but I think what it is in the beginning when Santini says to him, like, you're a part of this, you're a part of this film, and as Gilderoy starts speaking Italian, I think it's that he's becoming one with them, and that his world is changing around them. And it's kind of like, you know, if you ever saw that Simpsons episode where Bart suddenly speaks French because he's lived there long enough, you suddenly become a part of a culture if you live there long enough. You know, you can't refute somewhere you live for too long. I think he's slowly becoming part of this culture, even though he's still reading those letters from his mom and he's still trying to be very English noble guy against these crazier party horny Italians, or at least in this film. I'm not saying all Italians are, that he's kind of becoming one of them. And when he tortures that girl because she won't give the performance, that shows he's a lot different than he used to be. He was kind of this mousy character, and he suddenly become this really mean guy that he would do that to someone, who would play that sound for someone so she would give the right performance. And it was very creepy and unsettling that he would become like Santini. And I think that's why at the end he becomes, like, it looks like he's almost, with the light covering him, it looks like he becomes one with the movie, because I think he slowly becomes part of that culture. I don't think he's really going insane. There's no like breakdown scene or whatever, but I think he slowly is becoming one with them when he eats the seeds in that one scene. And there's even a scene earlier where that guy says something, he says in Italian that he should do this UFO noise, and suddenly I'm like, how does he know Italian all of a sudden? I thought he didn't know Italian, and suddenly he knows Italian all of a sudden. And I feel like it's like he's slowly becoming one with them, like that he'll, at the beginning I feel like he wasn't going to do what they were doing. He's very separate, and slowly, like, the girl gives him that advice to be mean on the phone, and he does it. The guy tells him to swallow the seeds, and he does it. He's slowly, kind of inadvertently and subtly becoming part of this weird Italian horror giallo film world. I like how it's just behind the scenes of the film, and there's a film within a film that you never see, but he's in the movie and he's becoming part of it whether he likes it or not. And it's terrifying in a way when the guy hands him the watermelon after he squishes it. Like, a lot of this stuff is in his mind, in the character's mind. Like, he just squished a watermelon and he kind of looks at it like he's handing him a piece of head, even though it's a piece of watermelon. You know, he's taken out of his normal situation where he's doing nice horse documentaries or working for TV. That's where you get the ambiance and the spooky feel of this movie, because you're seeing it through his eyes. And that's why, like, when he suddenly becomes one with the film, it's kind of like this crazy experience. Like, he can't accept that he's part of the film for most of the film. You know, he's just like, this is a job. And that's why he makes such a big deal, I think, why that one character makes a big deal about, like, this isn't for the money, this is for love and such. But I think it's slowly, by the end of the film, it is more for love than money. You know, it's kind of like when you're on a long vacation, you're back at work, you somewhat love it even if you're not going to entirely admit it. And I feel like that's what's going on in Berberian Sound Studio. I could be wrong. I feel like there's a lot of interpretations, but that's just mine. I think you can go in throughout and figure out everything that's going on. But it's such an interesting movie, and I think Peter Strickland did such a great job with it. So if you have seen Berberian Sound Studio and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to. This is kind of a weird little story about watching this movie. I actually inadvertently ended up watching this movie twice, and I usually don't do that, and a lot of critics don't think you should do that when it's a new movie, and I kind of agree for the most part. But I kind of didn't actually see the movie, because what happened is I had this Blu-ray copy that I had a friend who was in England recently. I really wanted to see it, and they were nice enough to get me a copy, and my Blu-ray player at first was not displaying the subtitles. And because this film is made in a way that the main character doesn't understand Italian, I assumed, well, maybe that's like part of the direction. That's really smart and spooky. I watched pretty much the whole thing, and then I read that it's supposed to have subtitles, and I realized I was wrong. I don't know why my Blu-ray player did that, but I fixed it, and then I had to rewatch the movie with subtitles, and it's a different movie. You really see it more from his perspective, because I couldn't understand what anyone was saying, and whole characters were completely different, and it was an interesting film experience. It's interesting watching this film without the Italian, which is every character who's not Toby Jones, made it even a stranger, weirder, spookier movie in a lot of ways than it was without it. If you ever get a chance, I guess, if you become a fan of this movie and you have a copy, you can watch it without subtitles. It's an interesting experience, but I actually recommend watching it with subtitles, because that is the actual film. You know, that's the way they intended it. Alright, well, I'll see you next time.